Gatsby had dropped by to visit Nick and invite Nick to the parties, open door, because apologizing nicely for the noise the parties make, and saying, please come over and visit me, come to the parties if you want, and come over and visit me, and I'd like to show you the house, and blah blah blah. Old sport. Now, that's one of Gatsby's many affectations. His whole life is an affectation. Affectation meaning phony, not genuine. Affected, put on, acting. Old sport. Well, in any time Gatsby meets someone whom he wants to impress, he will call that person old sport. Now, old sport is British, of course. So anyone who calls anyone old sport, if the person is not British, is certainly feigning, affecting the manners of the British, not only of the British, but of the British upper class. The British Eton, and Oxbridge, Cambridge. That's old sport. Money. So here's Gatsby calling Nick old sport. Nick is amused by things like this, and Nick is pretty sharp. He's no fool. Nick, basically, let's say Nick struggles a little bit to maintain a detached view of the things that he sees. Perhaps like any intelligent person. Reserves judgment, is amused by what he takes to be absurdities, but he admits that he himself is somewhat envious of the idle rich. Now, Gatsby, notice, is not idle rich. Where his money comes from, no one quite knows, but Nick is no fool. If there's mysterious money on that scale, it must have to do with drugs, alcohol, and maybe drugs. Drugs were a small operation at this time, not a big business. But alcohol was huge. Nick realizes this, and Nick is amused by this old sport thing, as Gatsby then continues and explains, well, Gatsby says that Gatsby, was a war hero during World War I, and then he attended Oxford, where he mingled with aristocrats, the very wealthy, thus old sport. He himself comes, he says, from a wealthy family in, I'm not sure, Minnesota maybe, but he doesn't want to give too many details about that, of course. What he does, he's very evasive about that. Well, Nick is amused by this, but he kind of likes Gatsby because he's harmless enough, kind of charming, attractive, pretty well-mannered. Okay. So Nick goes over there a time or two. We get a description of the parties, lots of drinking, hundreds perhaps of people there, outdoor and indoor parties. Nick, okay, I better not get out of sequence here. It turns out that Nick, as I said, Nick is related to Daisy. And Nick learns that Daisy and Tom, whom he knew in school too, whom Nick knew, have rented a large house a few miles away. Now, any house where Tom would be would have its stables and its large garage, so this is impressive money. They invite him over, so Nick goes over there. Daisy is glad, maybe too glad to see him. Daisy has been drinking, certainly. Tom too. And it doesn't take Nick long to realize that there's some tension between husband and wife. They have a small child, maybe 3 years old, but the child, of course, is raised mainly by the nurse, by the hired help. These are the idle rich, the idle very rich. Okay. Nick even overhears Daisy almost shouting at Tom, as Tom, glad to see you, Nick, great to see you, Nick, tell me what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. There's an arrogance about Tom. He can't help it. He is the idle rich. Everything has come easily to him, effortlessly, even his looks and his athletic body, it seems. And he basically expects to have his own way in any situation. Nick knows this. Nick is amused by him. It would be hard to say that Nick likes Tom. In fact, it would be hard to say that anyone could like Tom. He's utterly unlikable. But he has his kind of superficial charm and his easy money. Have a drink, blah, blah, blah. Talk sports or talk something. Now, Nick is very sarcastic about Tom in one thing, because Tom asked Nick if Nick has read a certain book. Well, this book is a German book, in translation, of course, for Tom. The point is that, does Tom read? Do the Toms of the world read? Why would a Tom read a book? To expand his mind, to expand his intellect. There's no reason for him to do this. He's athletic and active and all that. In short, he's kind of stupid, frankly. And so Nick is amused when Tom starts telling him about this book. And the book really is a book about Nazi style, before there was a Nazi party even. That's not quite true. The Nazi party existed, but in the 20s was not huge. A book proving the supremacy of the white race in the world. Well, Nick, scientifically, through research, well, Nick is intelligent, and Nick is amused by any such absurd theory, and amused that Tom would, first of all, take the trouble to read a book, and second, try to actually remember parts of the book so he can talk about it. This is amusing in itself. And a Tom is trying to prove the supremacy, the superiority, the supremacy of his own race, of course. And there's nothing superior about Tom except his money and maybe his athleticism, not his intellect. Okay, tension between husband and wife, as Daisy is telling Tom, don't go. Clearly Tom wants to go somewhere. Oh, by the way, this is also where we meet Jordan. Tanned, we would say sexy Jordan, the pro golfer woman. A pro golfing woman is already kind of a liberated woman. She's doing something that not too many women could or would do. Nick meets her. She's kind of there so that Nick can meet her. Daisy trying to help Nick meet a woman, and a suitable woman, perhaps. As soon as Nick meets her, he doesn't recognize her at first. He's seen pictures of her in the paper, though, he thinks. And when he learns that she's a pro golfer, his memory, in memory, he recalls seeing an article in a newspaper, somewhat scandalous, about Jordan's having cheated in some match, having picked up the ball from a bad lie, we say in golf, and having moved it to a good lie, and she was caught. Her caddy disclosed what she had done. It was seen. Scandal. She got by the scandal, don't quite know how. She and Nick are attracted to each other because they have a lot in common vis-a-vis the idle rich. That is, neither of them is idle rich, but both of them like to hang, let's say, with the idle rich. So they arranged to see each other again. But Nick, though he's attracted to her, immediately presents her as not an altogether person, at least. So Nick always at his distance, as he must, frankly. So they have met. Then let's see now. Oh, Daisy says she wants to come over and see Nick's house. She comes and what is it? Ah, yes. I'm not sure of some details here, but the point is that before too long, Gatsby sees. Gatsby knew all along that Nick and Daisy were related. And Gatsby, in a sense, though he probably likes Nick, he also wants to use Nick to get Daisy over there. Surprise. So Daisy comes over to see the house, and then Gatsby comes by. All of this had been arranged between Gatsby and Nick. Big favor that Nick is doing for Gatsby. So suddenly he appears. Daisy drops her drink, is astonished to see this. How old are they now? Near 30. Because it turns out that they had had a kind of passionate love affair in Louisville. How did this happen? Well, it must have been 1916, 1917 maybe. Gatsby had entered the military. We were at war, or soon, and had been made an officer somehow, and had been sent to Louisville for special training. There he had met Daisy, because as I said, that's where Daisy was from. And there, now Gatsby already had his fascination with the very wealthy, already had been putting on airs, as we say, somewhat affected. But this attachment between him and her was very powerful. She was younger, but it was obvious there could not be there could be no question of marriage. People from Daisy's class don't marry people from Gatsby's class, even from the class that Gatsby pretended to be a member of, or let's say Nick's class. It doesn't happen. People from Daisy's class married people from Tom's class. Anyway, a brief, torrid, heated love affair, but then Gatsby was sent off to war, of course. He had already, as I said, we learn all this much later. Well, no, I guess he tells this part of the story to Nick early. So, Daisy at Nick's house, Gatsby comes over, Nick observes them, and then very kindly goes outside, leaving them alone in the house. It's noon or something, it's daytime, nothing really happens, except Gatsby wants to show Daisy that he now, at least in terms of money, has money enough to marry her. If she will only leave Tom and marry her, his life would be complete.